He kissed me on the forehead the way he always did, quick and distracted, like checking off an item on his morning list. "Back by dinner," he said, grabbing his golf bag from the hallway. "Don't wait up if I'm late." You know how Carl likes to drag things out at the clubhouse. I stood at the kitchen window with my coffee, watching him load the trunk of his silver Lexus, 44 years of marriage, and I still noticed the way he moved, deliberate, efficient, a man who never wasted motion. The engine started. The car backed out, and then he was gone, disappearing around the corner of Maple Drive like he had 1,000 Saturdays before. But something felt different that morning. Not wrong exactly, just tilted, like a picture frame you pass every day, until one morning you notice it's been crooked for months. I finished my coffee and set the mug in the sink. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Our daughter lived in Seattle now, called once a week on Sundays. Our son was somewhere in Europe, teaching English, sending postcards that arrived 2 months late. The silence used to bother me. Now it was just another resident of this 4-bedroom colonial we'd bought when the kids were small and dreams were still shaped like swing sets and birthday candles. I was wiping down the counter when I heard it. A buzzing sound, faint but persistent, coming from the living room. His phone. Richard had left his phone on the arm of the recliner, face down, vibrating against the leather. I walked over slowly. I wasn't suspicious. Not then. I was just going to set it aside, maybe text him from my phone to let him know. But when I picked it up, the screen lit up with a message preview, "Missing you already. Can't wait for Tuesday." The name above it said Golf Pro, Dave. I stared at the words until they blurred. Golf Pro Dave. Richard didn't have a golf pro named Dave. He'd been playing with the same group for 15 years, Carl and Mitchell, and that retired dentist whose name I could never remember. No Dave, no pro, no lessons. I set the phone down carefully, like it might shatter if I moved too fast. Then I picked it up again. The passcode was our anniversary, June 14th. He'd never changed it, never thought he needed to. I typed the numbers with steady fingers, and the phone opened like a door I'd been standing outside of for years without knowing. The messages went back 3 months. Not explicit, not crude, but undeniable. Thinking of you. Lunch was perfect. I wish we had more time. Her name wasn't Dave. It was Diane. He'd saved her contact under a lie so small, it almost seemed clever. I scrolled through the thread, reading each message like lines from a play I hadn't auditioned for. There were inside jokes I didn't understand, references to restaurants I'd never been to, a photo of her hand holding a wine glass, her nails painted coral, a thin gold bracelet on her wrist. She had nice hands. That's what I thought. She had nice hands, and my husband had been holding them. I put the phone back on the recliner, exactly where he'd left it. Then I went to the bathroom, closed the door, and stared at myself in the mirror. 68 years old, silver hair I'd stopped dyeing a decade ago, lines around my mouth that told the story of every smile and every silence. I looked like a woman who had made peace with her life, but I hadn't. Not really. I'd just stopped asking questions. That night, he came home smelling like grass and beer, same as always. He kissed me on the cheek, grabbed a plate from the oven, and sat down at the kitchen table to eat the roast I'd made. "Good day?" I asked. "Great day. Shot an 82. Almost had an eagle on the 7th hole." I watched him eat. The way he cut his meat in precise squares, the way he wiped his mouth after every third bite. 44 years of watching this man, and suddenly I felt like I was seeing him through a stranger's eyes. "That's wonderful," I said. He didn't notice the flatness in my voice. He never did. The next morning, I drove to the address I'd found in his phone. It was listed under Tuesday appointment in his calendar, a townhouse in Fairfield, about 20 minutes from our home. The kind of neighborhood with cobblestone walkways and matching mailboxes, the kind of place people moved to when they wanted to start over. I parked across the street and waited. I didn't know what I expected to see. Maybe nothing. Maybe I wanted to prove myself wrong. At 10:15, a woman stepped out onto the front porch to water her ferns. She was younger than me, mid-50s maybe, with auburn hair and a white linen blouse. She moved with the ease of someone who had never had to rush through her mornings to get children fed and out the door. She looked happy. I drove home without stopping, my hands tight on the wheel. When I got there, I made myself a cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd signed our mortgage papers, where we'd helped the kids with homework, where we'd argued and apologized and grown old together. I thought about the woman in the white blouse. I thought about her coral nails and her ferns and her townhouse with the cobblestone walkway. And I thought about all the Tuesday appointments I'd never questioned, all the late nights at the office, all the golf games that ran long. I didn't cry. I was too tired to cry. Instead, I opened the drawer where I kept the household files and started looking. Over the next week, I became a detective in my own life. I found credit card statements with charges from restaurants I'd never heard of. I found a receipt from a jewelry store dated 2 months ago, but I hadn't received any jewelry. I found a hotel reservation for a weekend he'd told me was a work conference in Hartford. Each discovery landed like a stone in my chest, heavy and cold. But I didn't confront him, not yet. I needed to understand the full picture before I said a word. On Wednesday, I called my sister. Doris had been through a divorce 20 years ago, back when people still whispered about it at church. She'd survived, she'd rebuilt, and she'd never once told me she was sorry for leaving. "I need a lawyer," I said. "Someone good." She didn't ask why. She just gave me a name. Patricia Vance. Family law, 30 years of experience. Office downtown. I made an appointment for Friday. The night before my meeting with Patricia, Richard brought home flowers, yellow roses, my favorite. He set them on the counter with a smile that used to make my heart flutter. "Just because," he said. I put them in water and thanked him. I cooked his favorite dinner. I laughed at his jokes about the news anchor's hairpiece, and when he kissed me goodnight, I kissed him back. But when he fell asleep, I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, listening to him breathe. Patricia's office was on the 3rd floor of a brick building near the courthouse. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and a firm handshake, the kind of person who didn't waste words. "Tell me everything," she said. So I did. The phone, the messages, the townhouse, the receipts. I showed her the copies I'd made, the dates I'd written down, the timeline I'd pieced together like a puzzle I never wanted to solve. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. "You've been thorough. I've had time to think." She nodded. "What do you want, Eleanor?" The question caught me off guard. No one had asked me what I wanted in years. Not Richard, not my children, not even myself. "I want the house," I said finally. "I want to know I'm protected, and I want him to understand that I'm not a fool." Patricia smiled, just slightly. "We can do that." We spent 2 hours going over options, asset division, retirement accounts, the house, which was in both our names but had been paid off with money I'd inherited from my mother. She explained what would happen if he contested, what would happen if he didn't. She talked about mediation and litigation and settlement agreements. By the time I left, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Not happiness, not relief, just clarity. The fog had lifted, and I could finally see the path ahead. That weekend, I planted new flowers in the garden. Marigolds and zinnias, bright bursts of orange and pink against the green. Richard was in the den watching golf, the volume turned up too loud. "You're spending a lot of time out there," he said when I came inside. "It's good for me," I replied. "The fresh air." He went back to his game. I went back to my planning. On Tuesday, I told him I was visiting my sister for a few days. He barely looked up from his coffee. "Tell Doris I said hello," he said. I didn't correct him. I didn't say that Doris was in Florida visiting her grandchildren. I just packed a small bag and drove to a hotel near Patricia's office, where I spent 3 days signing papers and organizing documents and preparing for a conversation I'd been rehearsing in my head for 2 weeks. When I came home, he was sitting at the kitchen table with his phone in his hand. His face was pale. "Where were you really?" he asked. I set my bag down slowly. I told you. Visiting Doris. Doris is in Florida, I called her. I didn't flinch. Then I suppose you already know the answer. He stood up, his chair scraping against the tile. Eleanor, what's going on? I looked at him. Really looked at the man I'd shared a bed with for 44 years. The man I'd raised children with. The man I'd trusted. And I felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness. Just emptiness where love used to live. I know about Diane, I said. The color drained from his face. His mouth opened, but no words came. I've known for weeks, I continued. I've seen the messages. I've been to her house. I've talked to a lawyer. Eleanor, please, just let me explain. There's nothing to explain. You made a choice. Now I'm making mine. He sank back into his chair, his hands trembling. It didn't mean anything. She was just, I don't know. She made me feel young again. And what did I make you feel? He looked at me, confused. What? In all these years, Richard, did you ever once think about what I needed, what I wanted? Or was I just the woman who kept your house and raised your children and never asked for anything in return? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. I sat down across from him, my voice steady. I'm not going to make this ugly. I'm not going to drag our children into it or tell everyone at church, but I am going to protect myself. The house is mine. The savings we built together will be divided fairly, and you're going to find somewhere else to live. His eyes widened. You're kicking me out? I'm asking you to leave. There's a difference. He stared at me like he was seeing someone new, someone he didn't recognize. Maybe he was. Maybe I was finally showing him the woman I'd kept hidden all these years. The one who had her own thoughts and her own strength and her own limits. I never meant to hurt you, he whispered. I know, I said. That's almost worse. He left 3 days later. Packed 2 suitcases and a garment bag, loaded them into the Lexus, and stood in the driveway like a man who'd lost his map. I'll call you, he said, about the paperwork. I nodded. Patricia will handle everything. He hesitated, like he wanted to say something more, but there was nothing left to say. He got in the car, started the engine, and drove away. I stood on the porch until the car disappeared around the corner. Then I went inside, closed the door, and exhaled for what felt like the first time in months. The house was quiet. But this time, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt like space, room to breathe, room to think, room to remember who I was before I became someone's wife. That evening, I made myself a simple dinner. Soup and bread, eaten at the kitchen table with a book propped open beside my plate. I'd forgotten how much I loved to read. Somewhere along the way, I'd stopped making time for it. My daughter called that night. Mom, Dad said you two are separating. Are you okay? I'm more okay than I've been in years, I told her. There was a pause. Then, softly, I'm proud of you. Those 4 words meant more than any apology Richard could have offered. In the weeks that followed, I rediscovered pieces of myself I'd forgotten existed. I took a painting class at the community center. I had lunch with friends I hadn't seen in months. I rearranged the living room furniture and hung new curtains in the bedroom. Small changes, but each one felt like a reclamation. One afternoon, I found a box in the attic I hadn't opened in decades. Inside were letters, photographs, ticket stubs from concerts and plays, evidence of a woman who used to dream big, who used to laugh loud, who used to believe that the future was something to run toward, not hide from. I sat on the attic floor, surrounded by memories, and I cried. Not for Richard, not for the marriage, but for all the years I'd spent making myself smaller so he could feel bigger. When the tears stopped, I carried the box downstairs and set it on the kitchen table. One by one, I looked through every item, holding each piece of my past like a gift I'd forgotten to open. At the bottom of the box was a photograph of me at 23, standing on a beach in California, my hair wild from the wind, my smile wide and unguarded. I barely recognized her, but I wanted to know her again. The divorce was finalized 6 months later. No drama, no courtroom battles. Richard signed the papers without protest, accepted the terms Patricia had outlined, and moved into an apartment across town. I heard through mutual friends that Diane had ended things shortly after he left. Apparently, she'd wanted the excitement of an affair, not the responsibility of a relationship. I felt nothing when I heard the news. Not satisfaction, not pity, just the quiet acceptance of a chapter closing. On the day the papers were signed, I drove to the beach. Not the same one from the photograph, but close enough. I took off my shoes and walked along the shoreline, letting the cold water rush over my feet. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and I thought about all the sunsets I'd missed while I was busy being someone else's anchor. I thought about the woman in the white blouse, the one with the coral nails and the ferns. I wondered if she was happy now, or if she'd ever been happy, or if happiness was just another thing we chased without ever catching. And I thought about myself. 68 years old, divorced, alone, but not lonely, not anymore. When I got home that night, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on the back porch, watching the stars appear one by one. The garden was blooming. The marigolds I'd planted months ago were still bright, still reaching toward the light. I raised my glass to no one in particular. To new beginnings, I said. The night answered with cricket song and a gentle breeze that smelled like jasmine. If you're still listening, maybe you understand. Maybe you've been there too. Maybe you've spent years making yourself invisible, convincing yourself that quiet suffering was the same as keeping the peace. But it's not. Peace isn't silence. Peace is knowing your own worth and refusing to accept less. I spent 44 years waiting for someone to see me. Now I see myself. And that's enough. That's more than enough. If this story touched something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment. Tell me your story. We've spent too long being quiet. It's time to be heard.